How many Christmases like this do we have to go through?
Sometimes a single family dinner is enough to expose years of silence. See, this is a story about trust and how quietly it can be taken away. It's about a Christmas night that began with laughter and ended with police lights in the snow. It's about a woman who believed her life was her own until she discovered someone else had been managing it for years. It's about excuses disguised as care, control hidden behind concern, and a truth that refused to stay buried. By the end of this story, relationships will be broken, power will shift, and nothing will return to the way it was before. If you've ever felt protected into silence or controlled in the name of love, this story may feel uncomfortably familiar. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Stories like this are told here slowly, honestly, and without turning away from the truth. Now let me take you back to the night everything started to unravel. Have you ever sat at a family table and suddenly felt like you didn't belong there anymore? Have you ever looked at people you've known your entire life and wondered when they stopped feeling safe? That was the feeling that settled into my chest that Christmas night. Not join it warmth, something cold, or something that told me to listen carefully and say nothing. From the outside, the house looked perfect. Soft yellow lights glowing through the window, snow resting gently on the roof, the kind of home people photograph and post with captions like "grateful for family" inside. The table was full: roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, plates moving back and forth. Laughter came easily, a little too easily. Varian seemed determined to sound cheerful, as if happiness could be proven by volume alone. That's when I noticed what was missing. No one was talking about anything that matter. Edit was all safe ground, old stories, recycled jokes, compliments that felt practiced. The kind of conversation families use when there are things they're carefully avoid. Dingy tried to ignore the tightness in my chest. It was Christmas. After all, families were supposed to feel safe on Christmas Day. My grandfather walked in, didn't smile, didn't take off his coat right away. He stood near the doorway, slowly looking at each of us, not warmly, not angrily, but like a man confirming a suspicion he'd already made up his mind about me. Grandfather wasn't loud. He never had to be. When he spoke, people listened, and when he stayed silent, people grew uneasy. He took his seat at the head of the table without a word through him. Changed. You may recognize that feeling when nothing has happened yet, but everyone senses that something is about. Toy picked up my fork. Me hand didn't shake, but my appetite disappeared. A kiss from me. My mother kept smiling, though her food sat untouched. My father stared down at his plate like it had personally disappointed him. My brother wouldn't meet anyone's eyes. That's when I knew something was wrong, very wrong. Grandfather folded his napkin neatly onto his lap, looked around the table again, slower this time. There was no anger in his face, only disappointment, and somehow that felt worse. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, a second stretching longer than the last. Even the children had gone quiet. I remember thinking, please don't let this be about me, because whatever he was about to say felt permanent, like something that couldn't be taken back. Grandfather placed both hands flat on the tablet. Then he asked the question that shattered everything we thought we understood about our family. Why is a stranger controlling our family? No one answered, no one moved, and in that silence, I realized this dinner wasn't about celebration, it was about truth. And we were all sitting at the table when it finally arrived. One question can expose a lifetime of Lisa Medham's silence isn't confusion, Simides. It's guilt. That's what I realized after my grandfather spoke. No one moved, not a fork, not a glass, not a single breath. It was as if the room itself had frozen. Why is a stranger controlling our family? The words stayed in the air, heavy, unanswered. Eddie looked around the table, searching faces I had trusted my entire life, waiting for someone to laugh or say this was all a misunderstanding. One did. Me mother's smile disappeared completely, her hands folded tightly in her lap, knuckles pale. Me father cleared his throat, then stopped as if words had suddenly become dangerous. Me brother shifted in his chair, the legs scraping softly against the floor, a sound that felt far too loud. He felt exposed, as if the question wasn't meant for everyone. If it was meant for me, a stranger? I finally said, my voice thin, almost unfamiliar. What do you mean? Grandfather didn't answer right away. Instead, he watched the other, studying reactions, measuring suppressed, counting guilt. It's when fear settled deep in my stomach. This wasn't new information, not to everyone. Finally, he turned toward me. A man named David, he said calmly. He's been running the company I bought for you. The companion. Me heart skipped. That word had followed me my entire life, spoken like a promise, like protection, like something waiting for me. I don't have a company, I said quickly. I barely have savings. My voice cracked, and I hated that it did. Grandfather's eyes softened just slightly. That's what you were meant to believe. Across the table, my father pushed his chair back a few inches, then froze as if movement alone might expose him. Me mother reached for her water glass and missed it on the first try. Me brother shook his head. This has to be a mistake, he said too fast. There are lots of companies, similar names. Grandfather didn't argue. He reached down beside his chair and lifted a thick folder onto the to-breathe sound it made felt final paper. Doesn't raise its voice, it doesn't need to. These were sent to me by an old partner. He said by accident. He opened the folder and slid several pages forward. I didn't need to read them. The way everyone leaned back told me everything: tax records, ownership, filing, signature, and there it was, David Carter listed as the one in control. Me stomach turned. I've never met him, I whispered. No one corrected me, no one rushed to reassure me. Mother finally spoke, her voice gentle to gentle. Let's not do this tonight, it's Christmas. My father nodded quickly. Your grandfather's tired travel does that to people. Grandfather closed the folder. Don't insult me, he said quiet. Lead words landed harder than any shout. He looked around the table again, and something painful became clear. They weren't confused, they weren't surprised, they were cornered, and whatever this stranger had taken, they hadn't stopped him. They had helped him. He didn't know how yet, but I was about to find out. Have you ever noticed how people start explaining themselves before you've even accused them of anything? How excuses arrive polished and ready as if they've been rehearsed for years, just waiting for the right moment? That was what struck me as I sat there, staring at the folder lying open on the table between us. No one reached for it, no one asked to look at the pages again because they already knew exactly what was written inside of me. Mother was the first to move. Esh always folded her napkin slowly, carefully, as if calming herself before a difficult but familiar task. We didn't mean to keep secrets, she said gently. We were only trying to protect you. Protect word landed softly, the way it always had. Same word she'd used when she'd made decisions for me, without a skink. Same word that had ended conversations my entire childhood. Me father leaned forward next, his voice steady, reasonable. You were young back then, fresh out of school, didn't want to burden you with something so complicated. Before I could respond, my brother spoke, too quickly. It was temporary, he said, just until things settled down. Temporary. They spoke in turns, never interrupting one another. Like a sequence they'd already agreed on. Each sentence fit neatly with the next, building a story that sounded sensible. If you didn't stop to examine the gaps, he stayed quiet inside. Something began to shift, not violently, but decisively. You thought about the years after graduation, the apartment where the heat barely worked, jobs I didn't land, the holidays I spent alone because I couldn't afford to travel. No one protected me. Then he drew a slow breath. If this was really for my benefit, I asked, keeping my voice steady, why didn't anyone tell me? My mother reached across the table instinctively, then stopped midway, her hand hovering. Unsure. We didn't want you to worry, she said. Me father nodded. We wanted you focused on building your life. My brother stared at the table. It was easier that way. Easier. The word echoed louder than he intended. Grandfather hadn't spoken yet. He sat back in his chair, watching them carefully, letting the silence stretch long enough to become uncomfortable. You keep saying it was temporary, he said finally. His voice was calm, measured. Temporary arrangements usually don't involve transferring authority. My father stiffened. That's not what happened. Grandfather slid the folder back toward the center of the table and tapped one page with his finger, then explained this. The room went still. Lights from the tree blinked softly in the corner, cheerful, almost mocking, like they didn't belong in the same space as this conversation. Me brother spoke again, louder, now defensive. Paperwork gets complicated. Laws handle things, names move around. My mother nodded quickly. It's technical, it doesn't change our intentions. Something settled in my chest. Then, not anger, not fear, clarity. So let me see if I understand, I said slowly. Something meant for me was handled without my knowledge. I wasn't consulted, I wasn't informed, and now someone I've never met is listed as having control. No one answered directly. Talked around it, about stress, about responsibility, of how hard things had been for them at the time, and not once did anyone ask how hard it had been for my grandfather. Leaned back slightly. You didn't safeguard anything, he said evenly. You concealed it. My mother's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. Fair? He repeated. Fair would have been honesty. My brother finally snapped, frustration breaking through his careful tone. What were we supposed to do? Let her ruin it? The word hit me harder than anything else that night. True, in that moment, the last piece clicked into place. This wasn't about protection or Timinger concern. It was about control. Control disguised as care. Control justified as responsibility. Corta passed around long enough that it stopped feeling like theft. He looked down at the papers again. Stranger's name didn't feel distant anymore. It felt deliberate. It wasn't just ink on a page. It was authorized assessboard. Then a thought crossed my mind, one that made my stomach tighten. This wasn't something they'd done in case something happened to Meth. This was already happening. G looked up slowly, meeting each of their faces in turn. How long? I asked quietly. Have I not been in control of my own life? No one answered, and in that silence, I understood something that chilled me far more than anger ever could. This wasn't the full truth. It was just the first layer they could no longer hide, and whatever was underneath it was already moving whether I was ready for it or not. Have you ever reached the point where excuses stop sounding like mistakes and start sounding rehearsed? Have you ever felt that quiet click inside your chest when confusion gives way to certainty? That's where I was, sitting at that table. The explanations kept coming. But they weren't messy or defensive, they were careful, measured, each word placed like it had been tested beforehand. Me grandfather leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table. His voice calm enough to be unsettling. You keep calling this temporary. He said temporary arrangements don't erase names. My father exhaled. Slow and deliberate, the kind of breath meant to sound reasonable. We didn't erase anything, just managed things. Managed. Me brother nodded. Immediately someone had to. I looked at him. Then reality looked wouldn't meet my eyes. His finger traced the edge of the table again and again. Faster now, the wood grain suddenly fascinating. Managed how? I asked, me voice surprised. Might didn't shake. It scared me more than fear would have. Me mother answered. Before anyone else could. Day to day matters, contract to steal, you didn't need to worry about. I thought of the years after graduation at the apartment with the broken heat, earth jobs I didn't get. Nights I lay awake calculating how long my savings would last. You worried about contracts? I said quietly. I worried about rent. The table went still. Me mother's face fell. Me father shifted in his chair. Me brother swallowed hard and finally stopped moving his hand. Grandfather opened the folder again, slower this time. Deliberate lie slid a single page forward. This doesn't say managed, he said, it says transferred. No one rushed to explain. The word sat there between. You transferred. Me father rubbed his temples. There are reasons those things happen. What reasons? My grandfather a excellence. Me mother leaned forward, her voice softer now. We were scared you'd make a mistake, scared someone would take advantage of you. I almost laughed at an advantage of and selling it. I escaped. The room froze. I didn't say sold. My father said quickly, but you didn't say it wasn't. My grandfather replied. Me brother pushed his chair back sharply, the sound scraping across the floor. Can we not do this right now? He snapped. This is getting out of hand. No, my grandfather said, still calm and already is. My brother sat back down, jaw tight, eyes fixed straight ahead. Something shifted inside me, then not fear, not anger, alignment. You made decisions about my future, I said, my voice trembling just enough to feel real without telling me, without asking me. My mother reached for her tissues. We were trying to keep the family together. The family looked around the table. No one looked united. They looked cornered. Grandfather closed the folder and folded his hands. Here's what I know, he said. A company meant for her is being controlled by someone she doesn't. Ownership records show changes none of you can explain, and every answer you give creates another question. No one argued. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was heavy charged. If this had been a misunderstanding, I realized aloud, it would have been cleared up by now. No one corrected me. Mistakes don't hide behind layers of explanation, I continued. Secrets do. My father finally spoke, his voice lower than before. We were under pressure that landed. It wasn't polished, it wasn't defensive, it was real. What kind of pressure? I asked. Opened his mouth, then a knock at the door. Sharp, insistent. Politivery head turned at onto me. Heart dropped because whatever they'd been hiding, whatever pressure they hadn't named, I had a feeling it had just arrived. Have you ever noticed how the truth rarely arrives all at once? How it leaks, piece by piece, through the things people avoid saying? That knock at the door changed everything, not because of who was standing outside, but because of what it did to the room. Me father flinched. Before he could stop himself, me brother's foot started bouncing under the table. Fast and uneven. Me mother pressed her lips together so tightly they almost disappeared. Grandret didn't move. Sit, he said calmly, without turning his head. No one stirred. The knock came again, slower, more deliberate. I'll get it, my father said, already pushing his chair back. No, grandfather replied, let it wait. That was when it hit me. They were afraid of interruptions, because interruptions bring witness. Me father sat back down, his face tight. We didn't plan for any of this to come out tonight. The words slipped free before he realized what he'd said. Planted. Grandeur turned his head slightly. So there was a plan. My mother rushed in, voice too quick. Not like that, we just didn't want things spiraling. Then why are you panicking? I asked quietly. No one answered me. Brother dragged a hand down his face. Dad's business was struggling. The room shifted, not relief, tension. Grandfather leaned back, eyes narrowing. How badly? My father hesitated. That hesitation said more than any number could have. The construction company. My brother continued, words tumbling out. Now suppliers were threatening to walk loans. Were due, deadlines were missed. My mother nodded. Desperate. We thought it would pass. We thought we just needed time. Temporary. Yagani felt anger surge, sharp and dizzying. So you solved one crisis by creating another? My father finally looked at merely looked. We were trying to save everything. Everything except my grandfather tapped the table. One, saving something doesn't involve selling what isn't yours. My brother snapped back, voice rising. You think we wanted this? You think we enjoyed it? No, I said I think you justified it. Silence fell, thick. Uncomfortable, then the knock came again louder. This Timmy mother's composure cracked, swiped at her eyes. We needed cash, she said suddenly fast before everything collapsed. There it was, no soft language, no careful framing. Cash me. Head spun. So you sold it? My father opened his mouth, then closed it. Me brother stared at the floor, no denial. Grandfather closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying himself. To whom? My brother hesitated, just long enough to confirm it mattered, then said the Namath, same name printed on the documents. Stranger, the room felt nauseatingly still. How much? Grandfather scared me. Father answered, won't repeat the number, but I will say this, it wasn't survival money, it was desperation money. Silence that followed wasn't shocked anymore, it was sick. Me mother reached for my hand, gripping it too tightly. We were going to fix it, buy it back, put everything right when I sketch couldn't answer back aus. There is no right time to undo betrayal. Knock came again from Offica glared and stood slowly. We're done hiding now, he said, looked toward the door, then back at them. Whatever happens next, he added quietly, will not be something you control. As he walked toward the door, my chest tightened at Beckhouse. For the first time that night, I understood the truth completely. They hadn't just crossed a line, they had started something they couldn't stop, and whatever waited on the other side of that door was about to make sure everyone else knew it too. Have you ever noticed how the truth rarely arrives alone? How it shows up with witnesses and refuses to be explained away? The knock came again this time. It wasn't polite, it was firm, certain kind of knock that doesn't ask permission. It announces itself. Me grandfather nodded once toward the hallway. Now, he said. Me father stood, movement stiff, like his body knew what his mind was still trying to deny. Walked to the door and opened it slowly while uniformed officers stood on the porch behind them. Red and blue lights washed silently across the snow, pulsing against the house like a warning inside. Christmas music drifted faintly from the living room. Cheerful oblivious. We're here regarding a report of suspected document fraud, one officer said, calm lithe. Words landed heavy. No one spoketh. Officers stepped inside, boots leaving wet marks on the floor. They weren't aggressive, they didn't need to. The authority doesn't rush. Me mother exhaled a sound that barely counted as a breath and sank into her chair. Me brother stared at the table, his face draining as if the color had been pulled from it. The older officer scanned the room. Is everyone present? Grandfather answered evenly, yes. Then he gestured toward the dining table. You may want to start here. The officers approached the paper scalm, hands methodical eyes. They didn't. Because of the asked question, show owned what one. Signatures were aptly woe had legal. Authoritative answer came slower than the last. Me brother's voice shook when he spoke. Me father's responses shortened. Clipped. Me mother stopped explaining altogether. Thin. One officer turned to me. Did you authorize the transfer of ownership? I felt my stomach tighten, a sharp, sudden pull, but my voice didn't waver. No. I said I didn't even know it existed. He nodded and wrote something down. Then came the question that made my hands go cold. Did you sign these documents? The papers were turned toward me. Recognized my name. I didn't recognize the signature. Me pulse thudded in my ears. No. I said again, that isn't mine. Grandfather stood. That signature was forged. The word didn't equate sync for Jed. Me brother jumped into fast. There has to be some mistake. The officer didn't look at him. We'll determine that for a moment, just a moment. I wondered if they might still explain this away, if authority could be daylight, if the truth could still slip back into shadowshin. One officer stepped aside and spoke quietly into his radio minutes. Passed house felt colder's Muller when the second man entered. He wasn't in uniform, carried a briefcase. Didn't knock. This is Mr. Hodes, the officer said, legal counsel. Grandfather nodded. My attorney. Mr. Hodes placed the briefcase on the table and opened it with practiced ease. Removed a folder thicker than the first. Before we proceed, he said evenly, I want to confirm something. He studied the documents against Lilithan. He set to pages side by side. These signatures aren't just inconsistent. He said they were executed with identical pressure patterns. My father spoke, voice strained. We were under stress. Mr. Hodes didn't look up. Stress doesn't produce identical pen lifts. My mother broke. Then quiet sobs. She couldn't stop. The officer cleared his throat. At this point, we'll be collecting all relevant documents. He turned to my brother. And we'll need you to come in for questioning. My brother's shoulders slumped. Didn't argue as the officers gathered the papers. My hands trembled slightly. It for finalities wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a line crossed publicly. Officially at the door, one officer paused and looked back. This investigation will extend beyond tonight, he said. Bankspire Spubelik records. He let that settle. This will not stay private. The door closed behind them. The Christmas lights blinked soft. Lions standing there in the quiet that followed. I understood something with absolute clarity. What broke tonight Wouldn't be repaired with apologies and whatever came next would happen in the open? Have you ever noticed how quiet a house becomes after the truth walks out the door? Not peaceful quiet. The kind that presses against your chest until breathing feels deliberate. That silence filled the room after the officers left. No one followed them. No one spoke. Somewhere in the house, Christmas music kept playing, cheerful, oblivious, like it was mocking us. Like it belonged to a family that no longer existed here. My mother was the first to break. She covered her face with both hands and began to cry, not loudly, not dramatically, just short, fractured sounds, as if her body had finally caught up with what her mind had been refusing to accept. My father stood near the door, still facing it. He didn't turn around. His shoulders sagged, collapsing inward, like whatever he'd been carrying for years had finally crushed him. My brother sat rigid in his chair, staring at the empty space where the documents had been. His jaw clenched, then loosened again. He looked smaller now, stripped of certainty. Grandfather remained seated, still, controlled. This didn't have to happen. My mother said through her tears. I looked at her. Happen? This wasn't something that happened. It was something they did. You made choices. My grandfather said evenly. And choices leave marks. My father turned at last. His voice was hoarse. We were desperate, that word again. Desperate, the word people reach for when they want mercy for something intentional. We were facing foreclosure, he continued. The business was collapsing. Banks were calling. Suppliers were threatening lawsuits. As he spoke, my stomach twisted, not from sympathy, but from recognition. Now it all fit together. So you sold my future, I said slowly, feeling my hands begin to shake. To save yours. My father flinched. My brother shot up from his chair. That's not fair, isn't it? I asked, meeting his eyes. Tell me which part isn't. He opened his mouth, then closed it. My mother reached for me again. This time, her hand trembled badly. We were going to tell you. We just needed time. Time for what? I asked, for the questions to stop. She looked away. That was answer enough. Grandfather stood and gathered the remaining folders, stacking them with care. His calm felt heavier now, deliberate. You didn't just interfere, he said. You erased her agency. The word hit deeper than anything else. Agency. That was what had been taken, quietly, completely. My brother finally spoke, his voice low and strained. I didn't think it would go this far, but it did, grandfather replied. Because no one stopped it. The house felt wrong now, like a place that had revealed its true shape and couldn't hide it again. My father dragged a hand down his face. What happens now? Grandfather looked at him for a long moment, then said, now the truth stops staying inside this house. That's when I realized something that made my chest tighten. No one was asking how I was. They were asking what would happen to them. I stood up slowly. The room tilted for a second and I had to steady myself on the chair. I trusted you, I said. All of you. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. My mother sobbed openly now. My brother closed his eyes. I built my life believing I had nothing. I continued. While you decided what to do with everything meant for me, I turned toward the hallway, needing air, space, something that wasn't this room. No one followed. Not because they didn't want to, because they knew they couldn't. Behind me, my grandfather spoke again. There's more, he said. I stopped when I turned back. He was holding another folder, thicker than the rest, older, worn at the edges. I didn't wait for tonight to act, he said calmly. I prepared for resistance. My heart thudded hard. Prepared? He set the folder on the table. What's in here, he continued, doesn't undo what you've done. His eyes moved to my parents, then to my brother, but it ensures this doesn't stay a family matter. The room went completely still because whatever was inside that folder wasn't meant to protect them. And for the first time since the truth came out, I felt something sharper than grief. I felt the future shifting. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted saw the danger long before you did? Have you ever realized that justice doesn't arrive loudly, it arrives prepared? My grandfather held the folder like it carried weight far beyond paper. This, he said calmly, is what I did when things stopped adding up. He opened it slowly. Inside were copies of emails, bank notices, legal correspondence dated months before Christmas. I didn't confront anyone, he continued. I watched my father's face drained of color. Me mother stopped crying. Me brother leaned forward, eyes wide. I noticed reports missing. My grandfather said then I noticed names changing when I asked questions. I got explanations that never quite answered anything. He looked around the table, so I stopped asking. The silence that followed was thick, not shocked, but exposed. I hired independent auditors, he went on quietly, and when I saw what they saw, I updated my estate plans. Estate plans, the words hit me harder than anything else. Suddenly, Mr. Hode's calm efficiency earlier made sense to me. Grandfather slid one document forward. This is a certified ed copy, he said. Me father reached for it, then froze. his hand hovering just above the paper. Already knew what it was. I revised my will. My grandfather said every provision. My mother whispered his name. Desperate, you don't have to do this, I already did. He repeated, turned the document so it faced all of us. Any asset I control, he said, will now pass directly to her. The room tilted to her. My brother said, voice cracking. Me grandfather nodded exclusively. My father shook his head slowly. You can't be serious. That won't stand the first challenge. Definitely it will, my grandfather replied evenly. It already has. You're dismantling this family, my mother said, rising from her chair. You're choosing sides. No, he said calmly. I'm acknowledging actions. My brother slammed his palm against the table. You're punishing all of us for one mistake. My grandfather didn't flinch. This wasn't one mistake. The air felt tight. Chargetti realized something then. Everyone was arguing around me. No one was asking what I wanted. He stood. I need to say something, I said. They turned toward me, startled. I didn't ask for this, I continued. I didn't ask for money or control or revenge. I looked at my grandfather, then back at them. But I won't refuse protection that was earned by someone else's dishonesty. My father stared at me. You're really going to accept this? I held his gaze. I'm going to accept the truth that silence hurt more than shouting ever could. Me grandfather closed the folder. The law will continue its work. Investigations don't move quickly, but they moved. My father sank into his chair. What do you want from us? My grandfather answered without hesitation. Nothing. That was worse than Ongari understood then. This wasn't about punishment. It was about boundaries being enforced. Me mother looked at me, eyes wet, voice trembling. Can we fix this? I shook my head slowly. Some things don't get fixed. Said they get faced. My grandfather placed a steady hand on my shoulder. We move forward, he said, but his eyes told a different story. This wasn't over. Not legally, not publicly, not privately. Like Christmas hadn't just exposed the truth, it had shifted power, and power, once moved, never goes unchallenged. All that remained now was to see who would try next. Have you ever realized that losing people doesn't always feel like loss? Have you ever discovered that peace sometimes arrives only after everything familiar falls away? A year passed after that Christmas. Not quickly. It kindly. Time moved in fragments. Court dates, paperwork, wet mornings, where nothing demanded my attention anymore. The chaos didn't end all at once. It simply stopped being loud, and in that quiet he learned how much noise I had mistaken for love. There were no dramatic confrontations. After that night, no apologies that meant anything, no explanations that changed the truth. Just distance, permanent distance. Legal process unfolded the way it always does, slowly. Methodicality. Emotioni learned that justice isn't satisfying in the way people imagine. It doesn't heal, it doesn't explain, it doesn't comfort. It simply draws lines and leaves you to live on one side of them. But the truth remained tendered, unchangeable. Me parents moved out of the house I grew up in. Me brother stopped calling. At first messages arrived through others, then those stopped too. I didn't block them out. Of Ongari stepped away because staying would have meant shrinking again. Distance wasn't punishment, it was protection. Me grandfather stood beside me through all of it, not guiding, yet rescuing, not directing, just present in a way that didn't ask anything of Mel. Never said I warned you. He never needed toast. Spent time together quietly. Coffee without urgency. Walks without destinations. Countries, terries that weren't about the pastly, about what still mattered, only about what remained. I began again it in a dramatic way, not with announcements and with explanations. He built a life that was mine because I chose it. Every decision carried responsibility now, but also dignity. No one managing my life, no one deciding what I could handle, no one protecting me into powerlessness. Some nights memories still returned to bleed silence. Each moment everything tipped, but they don't hurt the way they once did. The remind me that family is not proven by blood, it's proven by respect. People sometimes ask if I regret how things ended. I don't. What I regret is how long I believed loyalty meant endurance. So long I mistook control for care. Christmas looks different now's Malurkwater. No forced smiles, and yet more peace than I ever had before. If you're listening to this and something in your chest feels tight, trust that feeling. If you've ever been ignored, spoken over, protected into silence, you're not imagining. Excellence serves the people who take truth, protects the people who are taken from. Some mediums. The bravest thing you can do isn't to fight harder or explain longer. Sometimes it's letting the truth stand even when it costs you family, because what you lose in false closeness, you gain in freedom, and that freedom, once claimed, is the one thing no one should ever be allowed to take from you again. If stories like this matter to you, if they help you feel less alone, consider subscribing to the channel. These stories are told for people who were never heard the first time, and if this story stayed with you, I already know why it needed to be told.